Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Tanvi Taneja, coming up in the next 30 minutes. Europe prepares to build a drone wall to protect its eastern flank. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius at the NATO Defense Ministers meet in Brussels says if Putin tests their borders, they would react decisively. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh to call on Brazilian Vice President Geraldo Alckmin along with Defense Minister José Múcio Monteneiro Filho in New Delhi. Aid trucks roll into Gaza as dispute over hostage bodies is paused. The dispute is over the fourth dead body returned by Hamas on Tuesday, which Israel says is not that of a hostage. And US government shutdown enters its third week as Senate rejects Republican funding bill for the eighth time. US Fed chair flags concern about sharp slowdown in job creation. NATO defense ministers gathered in Brussels on Wednesday for talks to discuss support for Ukraine and defending its border after multiple drone incursions across Europe. Ahead of the meeting, NATO chief Mark Rutte said that the session will focus on how to make their deterrence and defense even stronger, adding that the military alliance and the European Union were working together in their efforts to set up a drone wall to protect member countries from drone incursions. He also stated that the EU and NATO had different roles, with NATO providing capabilities on the military side and the EU holding the soft power of the internal market and making sure the money is there.
We'll touch on all those issues and, of course, on what happened just recently, the drones, how to make sure that we can do even more to protect NATO against also these new developments. So this will be an important day. I can assure you that the EU and NATO are really working very well together. There is no doubling at all. Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, myself, the relevant commissioners, including Kubilius and of course Kaja Kallas and the others, we are all making sure that we make use of the strengths of the two organizations.
US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Wednesday said commitments from NATO countries will translate into enhanced capabilities. Speaking in the Belgian capital of Brussels ahead of the defense ministers' meeting at NATO headquarters, Hegseth said the increase of firepower will benefit Ukraine through the prioritized Ukraine requirements list program, which has been developed by the US and allies to supply Ukraine with new weapons.
Mark mentioned it, firepower. That's what is coming, we expect it is coming from NATO. And it was a historic summit just a couple of months ago, brought about by leadership of President Trump to say we need our allies to step up. And they did, and they have in those commitments. Now those commitments will soon translate into capabilities, which is the most important aspect of it. And one part of that, of course, is Pearl, is the initiative where European countries buy U.S. weapons, transfer to NATO for the fight in Ukraine to bring peace to that conflict. And if there's anything we've learned under President Trump, is the active application of peace through strength.
Germany will spend 10 billion euros, that is $11.62 billion in the coming years for all kinds of drones. This is what German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said at a meeting of NATO defense ministers in Brussels. He added that if Russian President Vladimir Putin tests their borders, the bloc would react decisively. Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak said on Wednesday that they are ready for dialogue on gas supplies to Europe. Speaking at an energy forum in Moscow, Novak stated that the global demand for energy is growing, both regarding hydrocarbons and renewable energy.
Russia has always been ready and open to dialogue. If the number of reasonable countries seeking reliable and affordable energy cooperation grows, we are prepared to engage. We have the necessary energy resources. As you know, Russia ranks first in gas reserves and second in gas production. We are ready to continue this cooperation naturally, terms of mutual benefit and partnership.
Газа номер 1, по добыче страна мы номер 2.
Updates next from West Asia. The Israeli army confirmed that the fourth body handed over by Hamas has not been matched to any of the captives. The IDF in a social media post stated this following the completion of an examination at the National Institute of Forensic Medicine. It further said that Hamas is required to make all necessary efforts to return the deceased hostages. 3 of the 4 bodies of Israeli hostages in Gaza returned by Hamas late Tuesday have been identified. The slain hostages were identified as 20-year-old Tamir Nimrodi, whose fate was unclear until his body was identified. 35-year-old Uriel Baruch, who was killed at the Nova Music Festival on October 7th and was kidnapped to Gaza. 53-year-old Etienne Levy, who was missing for over 2 months after the October 7th attack, before the Israeli army informed his family that he was dead and his remains were held by Hamas. Hamas has so far released 20 living hostages and 8 bodies under the US-brokered Gaza peace deal, still keeping 20 bodies that Hamas is committed to handing over under the ceasefire agreement. Meanwhile, 8 trucks bound for Gaza were seen moving from Egypt's Rafah early on Wednesday, with several others lined up at the border area. According to Israel's public broadcaster, Israel will allow Gaza's Rafah border crossing with Egypt to open on Wednesday and increase the amount of humanitarian aid coming into the enclave after Hamas handed over 8 bodies of deceased hostages. Under the agreement brokered by US President Trump, Hamas was due to hand over all hostages, both living and dead, within 72 hours of the truce coming into effect last Friday. Further, reemergent Hamas fighters demonstrated that they were reasserting control in Gaza by deploying hundreds of security forces in the streets and executing several people they accused of collaborating with Israel. The outlook for Trump's peace plan darkened further when the president threatened Hamas with military strikes unless the militant group disarmed.
I don't have to explain that to you, but if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. They know I'm not playing games, okay? Now, we did something monumental. We got the hostages back. That was the first thing we had to do. Above all else, get the hostages back. Now, they misrepresented because we were told they had 26, 24 of dead hostages, if we can use those terms. And it seems as though they don't have that.
On to the US now. Government shutdown in the US entered its 3rd week as the Senate vote to move forward on the House passed the bill to fund the government again failed on Tuesday. The US Senate on Tuesday rejected a potential funding deal for the 8th time, guaranteeing that the government shutdown that has caused disruptions in services across the country will continue. The Senate voted 49-45 to advance the bill, short of the 60 yes votes needed in the 100-member Senate controlled by Republicans. Both Republican and Democratic lawmakers continued to blame each other for the impasse. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump said his administration planned to produce a list on Friday of Democrat programs that will be closed as a result of the ongoing federal government shutdown. Speaking to reporters on Tuesday, Trump promised to use the shutdown as an opportunity to exert more leverage over federal spending.
Democrats are getting killed on the shutdown because we're closing up programs that are Democrat programs that we were opposed to. So we're being able, and they're never going to come back in many cases. So we're being able to do things that we were unable to do before. So we're closing up programs that are Democrat programs that we wanted to close up or that we never wanted to happen, and now we're closing them up. And we're not going to let them come back.
So the number of US federal workers' layoffs as a result of the government shutdown was revised downwards on Tuesday, suggesting the Trump administration's initial statement about sweeping job cuts was too ambitious. The Trump administration has dismissed more than 4,100 employees since 1st of October, the day the US government shutdown began. The Justice Department last week, in a separate court filing, estimated the figure was at least 4,200. President Trump blamed the cuts on the US government shutdown. The government is closed because Trump and lawmakers have failed to agree on a spending plan for federal agencies. Trump is trying to pressure Democrats into accepting his spending plan by firing federal workers and cutting programs he says Democrats favor. Meanwhile, Fed Chair Jerome Powell on Tuesday said that the US economy may be on a firmer footing, but warned that the job market remained fragile. Speaking at a business conference in Philadelphia, Powell described a growing tension. Economic growth appears stronger, yet hiring has stalled. With official data disrupted by the government shutdown, the Fed plans to decide on future rate cuts meeting by meeting. Inflation remains above target, but weak employment raises new concerns. Powell emphasized that there is no risk-free path as the Fed balances inflation control with job protection.
That the outlook for employment and inflation does not appear to have changed much since our September meeting 4 weeks ago. There is no risk-free path for policy as we navigate the tension between our employment and inflation goals. This challenge was evident in the dispersion of committee participants' projections at the September meeting. And I'll stress again that these projections should be understood as representing a range of potential outcomes whose probabilities evolve as new information informs our meeting-by-meeting approach to policymaking. We'll set policy based on the evolution of the economic outlook and the balance of risks rather than following a predetermined path.
From US spending cuts to Germany's spending cuts. Well, Germany has seen some economically hard times, and the government in Berlin needs to cut spending to avoid going further into debt. Development aid to foreign nations will be on the chopping block. Lars Holte is with Deutsche Welle and joins me from Berlin now on the story. Hi, Lars. What are you hearing from the government? How is development aid changing in Germany?
Yes, hello, good to be with you. Indeed, like you said, the German government has made deep cuts everywhere. And with regards to development aid, the budget is down 8% next year to just now over 10 billion euros. Now, a cut of 8%, of course, could be painful, but that is not the point here. As a matter of fact, Berlin seeks closer cooperation with the Global South and not to divest from the area. So Development Minister Rem Alabali just introduced her plan for a quote, strong partnerships for a successful global economy. Now, she made it clear right off the bat that cutting down on economic support for the Global South is not a goal at all, especially in times when other major players like the United States under Trump have in fact turned away from supporting projects, or at a time when some other powerful players like China have strategically moved into, let's say, Africa, but also other markets, of course, with multi-million-dollar projects. Now, the German government is still saying they want to be a big player in the Global South, albeit with new strategies.
Okay, so talking of these strategies, what are they supposed to look like?
Well, essentially, the big idea is to include the corporate world into any developmental aid at a much earlier stage of planning. For example, the business community, including some, of course, of the big global players in Germany, will be part of setting the agenda, will be part of deciding on which developing economies will be the main focus for cooperation with Germany, with India, of course, being a big one there, but also some African nations, including Ghana. Now, the government government also wants to make sure that more companies here will get orders and jobs out of these partnerships, that they invest their own money as well. The idea is to strengthen supply chains, to have more value creation in India or in countries in Africa, and to be a partner rivaling the position that China has these days. Beijing, of course, has long invested in infrastructure in some of these countries, has made financing available, not necessarily in the long-term interest of some of these countries there, whereas Germany, of course, doesn't have the same level of business there at this point, often despite spending billions in the past.
Okay, and what does the German business community feel about this development aid? How are they expecting to benefit?
Yeah, by looking at the Global South as a real market as well. Let's have a look here at a project by Bayer, for example. That's a German industrial giant working in pharmaceuticals as well as agricultural goods. They have a major project right now in Africa, in this case in Zambia, where they're investing over 30 million in the development of high-quality hybrid seeds that could help grow corn there for 30 million people per year. And on background, we heard that Bayer says African farmers don't need sympathy or pity. They need functioning systems. And other companies are seeing that too. So the focus for the government in Berlin is now on not just supporting projects, but establishing real commercial partnerships. That is helping companies too, of course.
Okay. We leave it here. Thank you very much. Lars Holt there, reporting from DW Berlin. All right, on to South America now. A vehicle exploded outside a shopping mall in Ecuador's largest city, Guayaquil, killing one person and injuring several others, the country's prosecutor's office said on Tuesday. Interior Minister John Reinberg said that a second vehicle containing explosives was found nearby but did not detonate and was immediately neutralized, adding that police were carrying out controlled detonations and collecting evidence. Authorities urged residents to stay away from the area while investigations continued. Guayaquil is one of the most violent cities in Ecuador. Last week, President Daniel Noboa's car was attacked by protesters with rocks, cracking windows as the vehicle sped past. And on the Asian continent, at least 10 people were killed and 18 injured after an oil tanker caught fire in Indonesia's Riau Islands province. The fire broke out at MT Federal while it was docked and was undergoing repairs in Indonesia. Officials informed that the injured are receiving intensive care at several hospitals. The ownership of the vessel is still unknown. Authorities in Indonesia have raised the volcano emergency alert to its highest level after Mount Lewotobi Laki-Laki erupted on Wednesday. The roofs of houses in the village of Hikong in East Nusa Tenggara were blanketed by a layer of ash, sand and gravel after a tower of volcanic ash shot 10 kilometers into the sky. There were no reports of immediate damage or casualties on Wednesday, but authorities have warned residents and tourists on the eastern Indonesian island of Flores to keep away from the mountain and prepare for possible evacuation. The volcano last erupted in August. It also erupted in July, causing flight disruptions to and from the nearby resort island of Bali. More from Asia. As per Afghan officials, more than 12 civilians were killed in Afghanistan as fresh fighting broke out between Afghan and Pakistani forces on Wednesday. Afghan spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid said on X that early Wednesday morning, Pakistani forces launched attacks, killing more than 12 civilians and over 100 others were wounded. Afghan spokesperson also claimed that in a retaliatory move, Afghan forces killed a large number of Pakistani soldiers, captured their posts, centers, seized their weapons and tanks, and destroyed most of their military facilities. The neighbours have closed several crossings along their border in its aftermath, bringing trade to a halt and leaving scores of loaded goods vehicles stranded on both sides. On to India now. Brazilian Vice President Geraldo Alckmin, along with Defence Minister José Múcio Monteiro Filho, arrived in India on Wednesday. During his 3-day visit, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh will hold a meeting with the visiting leaders. The leaders will review the entire range of multifaceted relations in the field of defence between the two countries. The two sides will also exchange views on areas of mutual interest, covering military-to-military and defence-industrial cooperation. Trade and economic relations are expected to be a major focus of the Vice President's visit. Both India and Brazil are currently facing higher US tariffs, prompting efforts to strengthen bilateral trade and reduce dependence on external markets. Union Minister for Commerce and Industry Piyush Goyal delivered the keynote address at the plenary session of the Indian Chemicals and Petrochemical Conference 2025 held in New Delhi. Organized by the Confederation of Indian Industries, the conference highlighted the significant contributions of initiatives like Make in India, PLI, Gati Shakti and the National Logistics Policy. A report on building India's chemical workforce for a $1 trillion industry, underscoring the importance of collaboration between government, academia and industry to foster innovation, sustainability and talent development, was also discussed on the occasion. Addressing the conference, the minister highlighted the country's need to ensure supply chain resilience through diversified sources and protecting domestic value chains where needed.
We certainly don't want to be left at the mercy of one geography or even one or two geographies on any item in our supply chains, which can cripple our entire sector. We will need diversified sources. There may be items where we need solid protection and we need to have that domestic value chain in sufficient quantity to make sure our entire sector does not become vulnerable.
In a swift and coordinated humanitarian gesture, the Embassy of India in Jakarta, responding to an urgent request from Indonesia's Health Ministry, facilitated the rapid delivery of life-saving Prussian blue capsules. These capsules are crucial in mitigating the effects of cesium-137 contamination, a radioactive substance that poses significant health risks. Acting through India's Ministry of External Affairs, the essential medical aid was quickly mobilized and officially handed over by the Ambassador of India to Indonesia, Sandeep Chakraborty, to representatives from Indonesia's Ministry of Health. The Prussian blue capsules will strengthen Indonesia's capacity to manage potential nuclear or radiological emergencies, particularly those involving cesium-137 exposure. And on to some sad news now. Raila Odinga, the former Prime Minister of Kenya, passed away at the age of 80. As per reports, Odinga suffered a cardiac arrest on Wednesday. The former PM was the perennial opposition figure of Kenyan politics and was at the centre of Kenya's political journey since the 1990s. In an address to the nation, Kenya's President William Ruto announced 7 days of national mourning for Raila Odinga.
In honor of the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga's extraordinary contribution to our nation, I have declared a 7-day period of national mourning, during which the national flag shall fly at half-mast across the Republic of Kenya and in all our missions abroad. Our former Prime Minister, Raila Amolo Odinga, shall be accorded a state funeral with all attendant honors.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed grief over the demise of former Kenyan Prime Minister. In a post on X, Prime Minister Modi wrote, and I quote, "Deeply saddened by the passing of my dear friend and former Prime Minister of Kenya, Raila Odinga. He was a towering statesman and a cherished friend of India. I had the privilege of knowing him closely since my days as Chief Minister of Gujarat, and our association continued over the years. He had a special affection for India, our culture, values and ancient wisdom. This was reflected in his efforts to strengthen India-Kenya ties. He particularly admired Ayurveda and traditional medicinal systems of India, having witnessed their positive impact on his daughter's health. I extend my deepest condolences to his family, friends and to the people of Kenya in this hour of grief." Unquote. And on to some news from the world of football. The field for the 2026 FIFA World Cup is taking shape as nations from every continent battle it out to book their spot in the main draw. From Cape Verde's fairy tale run to Europe's established powerhouses. Let's take a closer look at who's made it so far and who's still fighting to join them.
The two-year qualifying marathon for the 2026 FIFA World Cup is nearing its end, and the picture for football's grandest stage is becoming clearer. With 48 teams set to compete, several nations have already punched their ticket to the next summer's tournament. This will be the first World Cup in history to be hosted by 3 nations, marking a milestone for global football. From Asia, powerhouses Japan, Iran, South Korea, Saudi Arabia and Qatar headlined the list, joined by Jordan and Uzbekistan, both scripting history with consistent performances through the qualifiers. Saudi Arabia confirmed their 7th World Cup appearance with a tense draw against Iraq. Africa's qualifying campaign brought both emotion and surprise. Traditional giants Egypt, Ghana, Morocco, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Algeria, South Africa and Tunisia made it through, but the story of the round belongs to Cape Verde. The island nation, with a population under 600,000, stunned Cameroon to top their group and qualify for their first ever World Cup, a true fairy tale moment for African football. From Europe, England became the first team to qualify, doing so in style with a 5-0 win over Latvia. England maintained a perfect record, scoring 18 goals without conceding. Meanwhile, Spain continued their flawless run in Group E, inching closer with a 4-0 win over Bulgaria. Elsewhere, Portugal, led by the evergreen Cristiano Ronaldo, were denied early qualification after a late Hungarian equalizer in a thrilling 2-2 draw. In South America, it's business as usual for the continent's giants. Argentina, Brazil, Colombia and Paraguay have all qualified, extending their dominance in CONMEBOL. In North and Central America, the traditional trio, United States, Canada and Mexico, have already qualified as co-hosts, while the rest of CONCACAF continues its fight. The 2026 FIFA World Cup will kick off on June 11, with the final slated for July 19. As more teams prepare to book their places, the stage is set for football's grandest celebration. Mehraj Singh's report for DD India.
So that's all for this edition of DD India Live. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles at DD India Live. And you can also download our DD India mobile app for quick news and updates on the go. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.